Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to India taking the lead in the global artificial intelligence governance and regulatory framework. Then in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the concept of judicial accountability, its importance, and the way forward. Then in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026 along with a value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to India and the artificial intelligence debate. Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, once famously remarked that artificial intelligence is not the future. Artificial intelligence is the present shaping the future. This tells us about the importance of artificial intelligence in the present times. In the last 4 to 5 years, what we have witnessed is unprecedented levels of growth and development with respect to artificial intelligence. And this has been across various domains: education, communication, e-commerce, defense, space exploration. You name the sector and you have it. That is, in almost all the domains, we have seen the infusion and integration of artificial intelligence. This has had transformational impact on the overall technological domain. That's the first part. The second thing is that the effects of AI, they are not just restricted to a particular country. What do we mean by that? Let's say the kind of developments which we are witnessing with respect to AI in the US, its effects are not just restricted to the US, but it is for the entire world, including India. Therefore, there's a need for having a robust governance and regulatory framework with respect to the developments taking place in the AI. So that the developments which are taking place in the AI, they are based on certain principles. And the benefits of the AI can be equitably distributed. These are the primarily 2 aims. In that particular regard, we have this particular editorial published in the Hindu, written by Syed Akbaruddin, former India's representative to the United Nations, where he says that in the coming global AI Impact Summit next year, India has the opportunity to basically frame these principles and basically reorient these governance and regulatory models with respect to the AI. Again, very important topic with respect to GS2 international relations. Second, technology. And yes, third, we have ethics, GS4. Why? Because the developments taking place in the AI, they have a lot of ethical implications, right? So this topic is going to be very important. What we'll do is we'll see what is artificial intelligence, what are the applications, examples, because we have seen in prelims questions coming with respect to technology, different applications. We'll see what is India AI mission, again very important. We'll see what are the challenges with respect to the development of AI in the country, what the author is recommending with respect to the overall governance framework of AI, and what should be the way forward. Believe me, it's going to be a very comprehensive discussion, and by the end of the first discussion, everything with respect to the AI would be very clear, right? Now, let's discuss what is artificial intelligence. So we have these 2 words, artificial and intelligence. We all know that artificial is something which is not real. I hope that is clear. Second, we have intelligence. Generally, when we talk about this particular word intelligence, we mean to say human intelligence. So what we are trying to say is when a particular machine is able to think like humans and give a response like humans, we say that this particular machine is having the ability of artificial intelligence. That is what the simulation of human intelligence by a particular machine. That is a computer, right? This is the basic concept. Now, what you have to understand is that every machine, every computer does its processing on the basis of certain series of steps, what we call as algorithms. Then there are certain computational models. For example, we have the language models. One of the language models, for example, can basically predict what kinds of words are going to come in a sentence. So these are language models. Once these language models becomes too complex and big, what we call them as large language models. You must have heard about them because you must be using ChatGPT or Gemini. And all these platforms use these LLMs, large language models. Now, what you have to understand is that at the core of artificial intelligence is the data. Because we are feeding in the data, right? We are feeding in the data to the machine, and the machine, on the basis of the algorithms and these computational models, it is basically performing a series of steps, a particular task. what we call as machine learning. That is, the machine is learning the data. And what it would do after learning the data? It would identify certain patterns, that is, certain identical patterns. Then there is another core aspect of machine learning, which we call as deep learning. So this is a subset of machine learning. Do remember, right? What is this particular deep learning? See, understand that we as humans, we have neural networks, right? Let's say you're touching some hot thing, or let's say you are basically talking to someone. Your cognitive abilities, they are based upon the kinds of networks which are present in your mind, what you call as in the brain. You must have heard about these words, central nervous system or stimuli, right? So these are the neural networks which are present in the human mind. Once the machine also does its activity on the basis of certain networks, then what we call as artificial neural networks, ANNs, right? So deep learning is nothing but the usage of artificial neural networks in order to come to a particular conclusion. That is what deep learning is all about. It's a subset of machine learning. And it does nothing but mimicking the human brain, the way human thinks. I hope that is clear. So also through this particular infographic, you can have a look that we have the inputs in a particular machine. Then the machine does the machine learning, right? A part of it is deep learning, which basically does the predictive analysis and cognitive computing. Then we have the neural networks, what we call as artificial neural networks. And finally, we have the data, the response. Now, what are the applications with respect to AI? See, AI right now at present is having application in almost all the domains. It has varied application. For example, take the case of healthcare. You must have heard about the imaging, right? The CT scans or the MRI we have. Now we are integrating the AI with respect to making these machines more efficient. Drug discovery, diagnostics, predictive diagnostics. For example, we have IBM Watson Health, which is using AI for basically treating the cancer. We have Google's DeepMind AI using this particular technology, AI, in order to have or to come up with the conclusions with respect to the retina. What are the issues with respect to the retina in the eye? Then we have finance. We are using AI in order to come up with personal financial products and services, or with respect to having this aspect of threat detection, right? In the finance, we have PayPal using that. Then we have in education with respect to personalized learning or automated grading system, we have the Gradescope using that. Then we have transportation. You must have heard about the automated driving, right? Autonomous driving, what we call as Tesla is using that. Then we have the intelligent transportation system, ITS, used by the Google Maps, right? Then we have the retail and e-commerce. So they are basically having applications in two domains. The very first is the inventory management, how the inventories are to be managed, the supply chains. The second is with respect to the preferences. You must have seen whenever you open the Amazon or Flipkart, it shows you the goods and services which you are more inclined to buy, right? So that is what the AI is all about. Then we have manufacturing. Siemens is using in predictive maintenance. That is, before a particular fault occurs in the supply chain, the AI would tell you that this particular component of the machine is having some issue. Then we have Foxconn, the largest electronic manufacturer around the world, using the artificial intelligence for efficient supply chain management. Then we have the agriculture. IBM Watson, again, it is using the AI in order to predict the weather and give alerts to the farmers. Then we have entertainment. Again, whenever you open the Netflix, it shows you the kinds of videos or series or movies which you are more inclined to watch, right? Again, the use of AI. Then we have cyber security for threat perception, threat detection, fraud analysis, right? Or user authentication. We have dark trace using that. So it has wide applications in other domains also, in environment, in defense, different domains. Now, what is India AI mission? Let's talk about that. See, the government of India is basically wanting to have our own version of artificial intelligence. And for that, we'll have to come up with our own indigenous large language model, right? So the objective is to establish a robust AI computing infrastructure, right? And for that, what we need is data. See, again, I told you, at the base of AI lies the data. So we should have that data which is credible, which is authenticated, so that the machine can basically learn the data and come up with right response. So that is very important. And develop the indigenous AI technologies. Right now, the picture is that the kinds of AI products and services which we all are using, most of them either they are born and developed in US or in the countries like China, right? So right now we have many startups working in this particular domain, but still we are quite dependent upon these countries. Therefore, India is basically having or aiming to come up with our own version of AI, right? And for that, we'll have to build our own indigenous large language model. So Union Cabinet basically approved this particular mission, and we have the very objective of this particular mission is to provide or to increase the computing capacity. And for that, we have to use the GPUs. And then we'll be able to develop the foundational models. But the question is, what is a GPU? See, GPU stands for Graphic Processing Unit. It's a chip, not that chips which we eat, but the chips which are used in the computer. Now, what are these GPUs? These are high-performing data analytics units. That is, on the basis of these GPUs, we have the machines learning the data, training themselves, coming out with a particular large language model and prompt responses. And therefore, these GPUs are very important with respect to the overall development of AI. I hope that is clear, right? Again, they are critical for training and building the large-scale AI models and the procurement of GPUs. What the government is saying is that through the India AI mission, we are going to subsidize these startups for the procurement of these GPUs, because see, ultimately these startups need these GPUs and they're very costly. So therefore, what the government is saying is that we are going to help these startups procure these GPUs, and so that they'll be able to come up with their own products and services. And again, for the prelims part, we have this particular initiative, which is a part of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, National E-Governance Division, and we have NASSCOM, which is also partnering this particular initiative. What are the pillars of India AI? The very first is startup financing, I told you, for streamlined funding and AI projects development. Financing for various needs for different startups. Then we have innovation centers, so as to develop the large language models and domain-specific models. Domain, for example, you can have a particular LLM performing the task in transportation sector, or let's say in education, right? So domain specific. Then we have datasets platform. As I told you, data is very important, and to have data in a particular standard where all quality checks have been performed is very important. Therefore, we have unified data platform, high quality data sets. Then we have safe and trusted AI. What it means is that we are basically coming up with our own frameworks of security, our own frameworks of encryption, right? Then we have application development. The very objective of development of AI in India is to basically ameliorate or do the conditions better in the socio-economic aspect. For example, we have our own concerns in poverty, education. So use AI for these goals, right? Then compute capacity. Come up in public-private partnerships, PPPs, so that we can also have the resources from the private sector, not just the government, right? GPU infrastructure, I already told you. Then we have the future skills. Coming up with different courses at undergraduate, postgraduate, or PhD levels with respect to the AI, right? And coming up with different data and AI labs. This is the very objective and different pillars of India AI mission. Now, what are the challenges with respect to AI in the country? The very first is threatening the job market scenario. See, understand, in every industry, there are certain repetitive and routine tasks. If a particular machine is trained in such a manner that it can easily do on its own these routine tasks, then those jobs will be finished. According to a report by McKinsey, what it says is that by the year 2030, again very important data you can quote in the examination, that by the year 2030, almost 375 million jobs would be compromised. That is, 375 million people will have to change their jobs, primarily because of AI and automation. And this constitutes almost 14% of the global workforce. Again, a big number, right? So displacement of routine jobs. And again, there is this aspect of vulnerability with respect to low-skilled workers, and then the aspect of job polarization. What we are saying is, especially in a country like India, where we have a dominance of informal sector, people do not have adequate skills. How can you then basically imagine or expect these people having expertise with respect to the AI? So that's again a very tough task. And then it can also lead to job polarization. What do we mean by that? See, right now we have very few people in the country who have knowledge with respect to the AI. They are in a better capacity to learn and understand various aspects of AI and to further excel and to earn more money, right? To exploit or optimize the use of AI. Then on the other hand, we have a large section of the society who's having no knowledge of the AI. So this is going to deepen the divisions in the society. That is what we call as job polarization. Again, very important keyword. Then we have limited GPU and infrastructure. See, what we are saying is, though the government is inclined, it's saying that we are going to basically help these startups procure these GPUs from different countries. But again, it's not an easy task, because the timely procurement and affordability of these GPUs is a very big issue. I'll tell you. See, you must have heard about a particular company, NVIDIA. So we have different chips manufacturers. We have Intel, we have AMD, we have, for example, NVIDIA. Apple also, you must be aware of M2 and M3 chips, right? Bionic chips. So these are nothing but these chips basically used in the overall development of AI. We have particular chip of NVIDIA quite frequently used for training the data sets in the AI. That is A, H and A. A100 and H100 chip used in these computational models. A100 chip, a particular chip, it almost costs from 10 lakh to 15 lakhs. And we have H100 costing around 30 lakhs. Can you imagine a particular chip costing that much? So it is prohibitively expensive, right? Next aspect is low availability of GPUs. Very few countries and companies exist which basically have the intellectual property with respect to the manufacturing of these chips, right? So again, a very important concern. Then we have data access and quality. The kind of data sets we have at present, they're not in a format which can be easily used by these computational models or these machines. Because most of the data we have, it is in vernacular language. So there are issues with respect to compatibility of the data, right? And therefore, we need our own models so that those models can understand that particular data. Then we have limited AI expertise and high costs. First of all, we have limited AI engineers and data scientists. And whatever we have, most of them are basically migrating to other countries. What we are witnessing is the aspects of brain drain, right? So again, we'll have to give them proper incentives, because most of these intellectuals who are having solid command in the AI domain, they're working in companies which are based in US or in China, right? High implementation costs. When we talk about the skills also, another aspect that right now we are focused upon the theoretical aspects. We are not inclined to basically delve deeper into the practical aspects of the AI, right? In our institutions and other colleges. High implementation costs. Let's say you have a particular enterprise and it wants to integrate the AI, because again, if it wants to compete at the global level, it would have to, let's say it's manufacturing a particular product and it wants to basically improve its efficiency and quality, and therefore it wants to integrate AI. That is a capital intensive task. It's not something which is quite, you can get it with small amount of money. So therefore, it is something which acts as a barrier for enterprises in India to basically adopt these technologies, right? Infrastructure integration becomes a challenge. Then we have infrastructure deficiencies. Again, very, very important concern. See, once we are talking about the development of having a proper efficient AI system, for that we need data centers so that we can have efficient cloud computing. And data centers are prohibitively expensive. It is not easy to construct data centers, right? So there is lack of data centers or advanced computing infrastructure in the country. We already have the Raabita. Now, Raabita is basically the high performance, AI high performance platform, right? It's a part of the Digital India program. And the very objective is to help these startups and different institutions with respect to research, the cutting edge research in the AI. But that is not sufficient. You'll have to come up with more cloud computing systems, right? So Raabita is nothing, again important for prelims. It's a cloud computing system for the AI research in the country. Then we have ethical and integrity concerns. See, we all know that we have biases in the societies. There are some unconscious biases which are there in the minds of the people. And that if people have those biases, definitely the data would also have that. And data is something which is going into the machines. Therefore, the machines are going to give you a response which is biased in nature. So that is a very grave concern, right? So we'll have to remove those biases, and that's a very tough task. Next aspect is that most of these platforms and applications, they're using the personal data. You must have seen whenever you install a particular app or chat GPT or anything, it asks for your user consent and you just click on that particular tick mark. But what you don't see is what are the terms and conditions mentioned. So let's say if you want to convert your own image into a Ghibli style, you're giving your personal photograph. And that again, the company can use it for any purpose. So there is an aspect of privacy also which is involved. Geopolitical and regulatory issues. What we are trying to say is, as I told you, There are certain countries, and in those countries, there are certain companies who have the intellectual property or the patents with respect to manufacturing those chips. Let's say there is a particular issue between China and Taiwan. That would definitely affect the supplies of chips in the other countries. Or let's say there's a trade war going on between China and US. So what we're trying to say is that that would have an effect on the global supply chains and the kind of developments which we are witnessing in India. That is again a very important issue, geopolitical and regulatory issues, right? Next aspect is environmental concerns. When we talk about the kind of energy which is being consumed, we have these data centers, right? They are highly energy intensive. They're consuming a lot of energy, electricity. You must have seen that Donald Trump, what he ordered was that right now, US is going to basically use a lot of its fossil fuel reserves so that it can give an impetus to the AI industries. President Trump has ordered that because he's not in favor of, or he's not a believer in this climate change. So what you have to understand, that it consumes a lot of energy. These data centers, they use a lot of pure water for the cooling systems, right? So the present context or the way in which the AI is being developed, it is unsustainable in nature. That is what you have to understand, right? Also, according to the International Energy Agency, in the year 2022, as a part of the global electricity consumption, these AI platforms use almost 1.3%. And by the year 2026, just in 4 years, it's going to be almost more than 3%. So they are using a lot of electricity. Just look at the kind of structure we have in India with respect to the regulation, with respect to AI Mission, which focuses upon the infrastructure development, and then we have global cooperation. So when we talk about the regulation, what you have to understand is that the government is having consultations with different companies, for example, or we have the pressure groups, for example, NASSCOM, right? Niti Aayog has come up with national strategy on AI and framework, right? Then we have states, for example, Telangana or Karnataka coming up with their own policies in order to foster the development of AI in the country. India AI Mission focusing upon the infrastructure development. Then we have global cooperation. Then AI Safety Institute will play a key role in framing the AI regulation, operationalizing the India AI Mission, and promoting the global cooperation. And we'll talk about this. What is this security framework? Now, what the author is saying, very important component. What he's saying is that artificial intelligence is in the spotlight, and we have a particular global concern which we have to solve. What he's saying is that in the end of 2022, we witnessed the phenomenal rise of ChatGPT. And from the niche labs, that particular product came into the aspect of public and policy discourse. Almost every section of society, educated section who basically knows how to operate the computer, try to utilize and exploit the benefits or the kind of features of these AI platforms, including ChatGPT, and we have Gemini also and other platforms. And since then, 3 major global summits have taken place with respect to the overall regulation of this particular sector. For example, we have the Bletchley Summit of 2023 or the Paris Summit, which took place in 2025. So we have AI Impact Summit of 2026, which would be held in New Delhi. And this gives opportunity to India to basically come up with its own principles of AI governance and regulatory framework, and to make sure that AI is developed in such a manner that it serves as public good, not just as something for corporate interest. That is what the author is saying, that we have to promote the use of AI as a public good, right? Next aspect is that right now we have a fractured world order. We all know what is happening. There are geopolitical tensions. You talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. You talk about the turmoil in the West Asia. You talk about what is happening between China and US, or the unilateral policies of President Trump. So there is a fractured world order. And the last Paris Summit of 2025, it was kind of a failure, because what it showed was deep divides among different countries. And the overall aspect of global AI governance, it remained at stake. No conclusive action has been taken with respect to the AI governance, right? Now, India's position around the world as a particular country which is non-aligned, which is not a particular alliance partner, right? And also what we call as ourselves as the Vishwaguru. So it offers us the opportunity to basically take the lead with respect to the AI governance. Next aspect is what have been the preparatory steps. What is India doing for this particular summit? That is what the author is saying. He's saying that the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has already started since June 25, the nationwide consultation with respect to the students, the researchers, the startups of how the global governance should take place. And this particular aspect gives India a democratic edge than other countries, because this was not seen in other countries. It was a kind of a top-down approach. But we are having a multi-stakeholder approach, right? Focus would be on inclusive growth, development, environmental sustainability through artificial intelligence. Now, what are the 5 key action plans which the author says that India should adopt? And again, these are very important. You can also quote in the examination. The very first is pledges with accountability. What the author is saying is that we have in India, we have a very robust digital public infrastructure. For example, talk about Aadhaar. We have more than 130 identities in the Aadhaar. Talk about the Unified Payment Interface, UPI, right? Monthly, according to National Payments Corporation of India, monthly we have almost 12 billion transactions taking place, more than 12 billion transactions taking place monthly on a monthly basis on the UPI platform. So we have a very robust digital public infrastructure. And therefore, we are in the position to basically come up with more effective solutions, right? What he says is that for every country who's going to be a part of this particular summit, they should have one measurable AI goal. For example, let's say they can decide that we are going to reduce the electricity consumption for the AI, or we are going to use the AI in social domains, for example, educating more of rural girls. So they should have a particular target, right? And in order to basically measure their progress, we should have these public scoreboards. Then we have leadership of the global south. What the author is saying is that till now, the global south has been completely avoided, has been completely neglected when we talk about the global governance with respect to AI. So right now, it is India's turn to basically include these countries, African countries, Latin American countries, right, in the overall participation, ensure a more inclusive participation, and we can also come up with AI for Billions Fund, so that this particular fund, which is being funded by different development banks around the world, or let's say we have sovereign wealth funds. You must have heard about these Gulf countries, Dubai, we have UAE, we have Saudi Arabia with these sovereign funds, or we have the pension funds of Canada. They can basically fund these things, and therefore we can have the aspects of cloud access, fellowships, and data sets in the countries of global south, right? Then we have establishing a global AI safety collaborative. What the author is saying is that several initiatives have been taken. Many summits have taken place. For example, the Bletchley Summit of 2023, and different AI institutes have come to basically make sure that the development of AI takes place on certain lines, on principles. But what we see is that there is no shared safety checklists. What we have to propose is that there have to be constant red teaming. What is red teaming? That you have a particular product, you are developing the AI product, right? And you basically, in a real situation, give challenges to that particular machine, give security threats, and see how the machine is performing in real-time scenario. That is what red teaming is. Stress tests. So we need to come up with a framework so that we can apply these things and make our own systems of AI more robust, right? Then we have balanced regulatory path. There are divergence. See, for example, let's say, and these are very important points in order to understand the global scenario. US, you have a country. US is focusing upon more innovation, less restrictions. EU is having its own AI Act. You must have heard about the AI Act of 2024, where they are proposing a tiered regulatory structure, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, on the basis of risks which are involved. Then you have China, completely state controlled. So there are divergences. What we should do in this particular scenario? The regulatory models, what the author is saying is, should follow the voluntary frontier AI code of conduct. What do we mean by that? That we are not going to come up with binding regulations that you will have to abide by this. No, we'll say that these are the voluntary code of conducts, but actionable. That is, if you follow, you are going to get the returns. So we should come up with a more robust voluntary frontier AI code of conduct. Then we have preventing the fragmentation. There has been increasing rivalry when we talk about the AI, right? It is in every domain, be it trade. We know what US is doing right now, but more in case of technology, because technology is the future, right? So what we have to do is India should use its position, which position of non-aligned, of having a particular legacy of bridge building, in order to come up with more inclusive AI architecture. Use these keywords in your answer, going to be very important. What should be the general way forward? The very first is incentivize the hardware manufacturing. We have talked about this. We already have the production linked incentives. Expand these to another areas, different areas. For example, the hardware is used in the data centers or cloud computing. Give PLI scheme for that. Definitely, then we'll be able to have our own self-reliance in this particular domain, right? Startup supports. We are already doing that, but not enough. We'll have to basically expedite, increase the kind of funding or the technological help we are giving to our startups. For example, we have T-Hub in Telangana, where the government of Telangana, through the T-Hub, is helping these startups, right? Then we have comprehensive data ecosystem. Come up with national data platform. You will say, what is this particular platform now? Data platform. So that it serves as a comprehensive repository of data. I told you, data is at the center of AI. So we need to have this particular platform, national data platform, which serves as the most credible source of data, where we can directly use this particular data, and it is present in a particular standard format, right? Where all quality checks have been performed. And there are proper encryption. You already know what is encryption. Encryption is there in Telegram and WhatsApp, right? So the security features with respect to the messages. So those security features must also be there for the data, right? And data labeling. Let's say you have a particular set of data for education, for agriculture. So you basically catalog the data. That's what we are trying to say. Prioritize ethical AI. This is where the aspects of GS4 come in. What we are saying is that we need to have ethical AI. First, the benefits of AI should be equitable in nature. Second aspect, let's say whenever you're opening the Amazon or Netflix, why it is showing you only those products and services which you are more inclined to buy. This is something which is not right. You must be feeling that no, it's right. But in actual reality, it's not right, because it is using your own personal preferences. So there has to be autonomy. There's a violation of autonomy with respect to these applications. And this is again basically disregarding the ethical aspects. More, it is also bringing in social biases in the kind of response which machines are giving, because we have social biases in the society. So all needs rectification. There has to be independent AI ethics board, regular AI audits by third party to make sure that whether the kind of responses which machines are giving, is it right or not. Then we have AI applications. Especially in a country like India, we need to come up with those applications, those products, which basically improve the conditions of the people at large. Look at the social domain. Make sure that these products help in basically alleviating the poverty or reducing malnutrition or improving the literacy rates. That is what the overall objective is, right? We are a welfare state, directive principles of state policy. Next aspect is equitable access to AI benefits. Make sure that all the benefits are equitable in nature, right? Not that just a particular section of society is exploiting all the benefits, right? All the riches. Promote sustainable AI. Use those kinds of energy sources which are sustainable in nature. Use renewable energy sources for the development of these data centers. Come up with more of these renewable energy sources, right? For more efficient AI algorithms and hardware, renewable energy sources for data centers. Then we have talent gap. Right now, we already have very few people in India, the data scientists and AI engineers. And most of them are basically flying abroad. Primarily because they have better incentives, better prospects over there. Why can't the government and the private sector give the same prospects in India? So we'll have to basically incentivize them, right? Make sure that we have proper internships, research projects, and faculty exchange from the best colleges around the world, where we see transformational research taking place in the AI. Why not call those professors for a certain time period, right? Incentives, that is better salaries. Give them better money, because money is something which lures everyone. So give them better packages so that they are able to stay and work in that particular domain, right? So that's the overall objective. So we try to comprehensively cover is what we are saying is definitely India is doing its best, for example, in the form of India AI Mission. But there are issues with respect to the technology, with respect to the supply of these GPUs, with respect to the talent gap, the ethical considerations. So if we really want to become a Vishwaguru, we'll have to first abide by these principles and then come up with that governance framework for the year 2026, when we are going to have this AI Impact Summit, so that the other countries can also emulate those principles and practices. Let's have a practice question. It says, in the emerging landscape of artificial intelligence, India has the opportunity to steer the global AI governance towards inclusivity, safety, and sustainability. Please read the question. It's very important. I have framed in such a manner that it covers almost entire aspects. In the emerging landscape of artificial intelligence, India has the opportunity to steer the global AI governance towards inclusivity, safety, and sustainability. In the light of this statement, critically examine, the word is critically examine, India's potential role in shaping a democratic and equitable global AI order. If I'm using the word critically examine, you'll have to talk about the challenges also, right? So please try to write this particular answer. And yes, if you're lacking the initiative, Do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to, is the Indian judiciary immune to accountability? Just before a few months, we had hordes of currency notes, half-burnt currency notes, which were found at the official residence of Justice Yashwant Verma of Delhi High Court. The then Chief Justice of India basically constituted a 3-membered committee, and the committee came to the conclusion that the cash found at Justice Verma's residence couldn't have been there without the consent of that particular judge or his family. In that particular regard, we have the Union Parliamentary Affairs Minister, who has already said that more than 100 MPs have signed a particular notice to bring a motion for removal of Justice Yashwant Verma in the Parliament. Now, this brings to the fore the importance of this particular concept of judicial accountability. See, we live in a parliamentary democracy, and we often give more importance to the aspects of accountability of the executive to the parliament. We rarely talk about the aspects of judicial accountability, which is also very important because we have an independent judiciary. So what we'll see is what this particular concept is, and then what are the challenges and what should be the way forward. Again, aspect of GS2 judiciary. Let's first talk about what is the definition of judicial accountability. What do we mean by that? So it's basically the responsibility of the judges to uphold the judicial ethics, impartiality, principles of impartiality, transparency, and constitutional values. Here, when I'm talking about constitutional values, I'm talking about the aspects of constitutional morality, the very soul of the constitution, the morals which are basically the bedrock of the constitutions, right? Answerable for the misconduct or inefficiency. So if they commit any of these activities, they should be answerable to the relevant authorities, right? That's what the definition of judicial accountability is. What are the principles or the key tenets of judicial accountability? The very first is safeguarding the rule of law, because it is a rule of law and not of men. There should not be the aspect of arbitrariness which is involved, right? Then maintaining the public trusts. Why we are focusing upon public trust? See, these judges, they are non-elected people, and they are the pillars of the democracy, one of the pillars of the democracy. So they'll have to maintain that perception of public trust. People would have to believe in them, and for that they'll have to showcase through their own activities, right? Promoting transparency in the overall working, because without that it's really difficult to maintain the accountability. Then we have ensuring justice, guaranteeing the fair and impartial administration of justice, and then we have upholding the law, not just for others but also for themselves, right? So these are the principles of judicial accountability. See, we all know that India is a construct of constitutional democracy, and over here judiciary plays a very important role, whether it's with respect to safeguarding the rights of the people, the rights of the institutions. It provides the recourse to the citizens and the institutions to basically approach it if their rights are infringed. Also, the other aspect is, let's say you have the legislature or the executive breaching its boundary. So judiciary comes to the recourse, right? So it prevents the executive or legislative overreach, right? Now, again, if we are giving such an important position to the judiciary, what is really important is to know that judicial accountability becomes sine qua non, becomes indispensable in the overall functioning of the state. And therefore, in a country like India, where we have a complete structure of independent judiciary, this is quite important. Also, in order to maintain the public trust and democratic legitimacy. Why both are important? Because as I told you, judges are non-elected people, and they'll have to showcase through their actions, not by words, through their actions, that yes, the principles of judicial accountability and transparency are being kept in letter and spirit. Next aspect is, what is the importance of judicial accountability in a country like India? The very first is preserving the rule of law and not of men, and constitutional governance. See, we have the Constitution of India, which prescribes a certain boundary for every organ of the state. They'll have to basically abide by those constitutional boundaries, adhere to those principles, and that is very important. And one of the most important aspect is maintaining the aspects of judicial accountability and transparency. Then we have ensuring transparency and public confidence. In order to ensure that the people have trust in the judiciary, that the judiciary has a moral legitimacy, it is really important to understand that judiciary must abide by these principles, must showcase these things in its actions. Again, very important. So that people have proper trust in the criminal justice system of which judiciary is a very important component. Then we have balancing the judicial independence with responsibility. See, again, it's fine that in a country like India, you are giving too much of importance to judicial independence. It's fine. But in the guise of judicial independence, you cannot say that we are not obliged to basically fulfill the principles of judicial accountability. That must not be a barrier. Judicial independence cannot be a pretext, cannot be an excuse that we are not going to basically fulfill the principles of judicial accountability and transparency. Right? So if it happens, because sometimes, see, there's no limit to which Constitution does not prescribe a limit. It all depends upon the kinds of actions being delivered, the verdicts being delivered, or the actions being showcased by the judiciary. So if these things continue, then it would risk arbitrariness by judiciary. Therefore, the principles of accountability should be there so as to prevent the abuse. Because the Constitution gives you a very important position and it protects you, it shields you. So you should also basically fulfill the principles of accountability. Then preventing the delay and ensuring the efficiency. You talk about the case management system. You talk about the discipline of the code of conduct with respect to judiciary, or you talk about the productivity of the cases, that what has been the disbursal rate. So for all these things, accountability is sine qua non, very important. Guarding against the judicial misconduct. There have been several allegations, I'm using the word allegations, for corruptions in the judiciary, especially when we talk at the subordinate level, or nepotism with respect to the appointment of judges, because we all know that even for the appointment and transfer, the power lies with the courts themselves, right? Or biases. So therefore, in this particular scenario, the accountability becomes very important so as to maintain the standards and professional conduct. I hope these things are clear. Now, what are the various aspects of judicial accountability in India? See, when we talk about the removal of judges, we have Article 124 subclause 4 with respect to the Supreme Court judges, and we have Article 217 subclause 1 subclause B with respect to the High Court judges. So they basically talk about the removal of these judges. Please remember, the word impeachment is used only for the president, not for these judges. The word is removal. So in order to have a proper statutory framework with respect to the procedure of how things are going to be carried, we have the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. So first we need a motion either from Lok Sabha or Raj Sabha, 100 members in Lok Sabha and 50 members in Raj Sabha. Then the chair would decide whether to accept the motion or not. Then if accepted, then there would be a particular inquiry being conducted by a 3-membered body. If it says that yes, the particular judge is guilty of that particular thing, then the motion would be initiated. It would require special majority. If the committee says no, then nothing would happen. So again, if by the special majority, if that particular motion is passed, then that particular notice would be then sent to the president, who would then sign on a piece of paper. And then from that particular day onwards, the judge stands removed. That's the whole process, right? Next aspect is, see, when we talk about the removal process, I'm using the word removal process. It's very rigid and it's there in the Constitution. The Constitution talks about the kind of majority which is required. But there are certain other mechanisms, the in-house mechanisms of the judiciary. You must understand that when we talk about the administrative power, it lies with the Supreme Court. Also, we have some administrative power with respect to the high courts. So they can examine the complaints with respect to these corruption or nepotism or lack of performance, right? But these things, understand, these in-house mechanisms, they do not have any statutory status. It all depends upon the whims and fancies of the Supreme Court and the high courts, right? Next, we have Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. Though it was introduced, again, it lapsed. It was never enacted, right? Then we have Declaration of Assets and the Right to Information. There was a very important case of 2010. The Central Public Information Officer Supreme Court versus Subhash Chandra Agarwal, 2010. Where the Supreme Court said that the Office of the Chief Justice of India is a public authority under the RTI. So though they said that it's a public authority, since then, whenever there have been regular requests for the information clearance, information has not been given by the Supreme Court in many cases. So the approach has been rather cautious. Supreme Court is quite cautious in revealing the information. That should not be the case, right? So they basically voluntarily declare their own assets and everything. There is no legal obligations with respect to that. Next aspect is contempt of court provisions. Again, very critical aspect. On one hand, we have given so many powers to the judiciary that they have the power. If they feel that something has been said or something is being done which basically affects the integrity of the judiciary, they can basically declare it as contempt of court. So people can't even speak about that. See, you'll have to make that fine boundary of what constitutes a contempt and what should be basically done by the judiciary to fulfill its principles of accountability, right? It has shielded the judiciary from criticism. So there has to be a particular aspect of how to balance the accountability of the judiciary versus the free speech, right? You cannot say that, through your speech, you are basically doing the contempt of the court, right? If you're asking about the accountability. Then collegium system and the lack of transparency. See, the collegium system, the word, is not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. It is by the interpretation of the Supreme Court in various judges' cases. Through various judges' cases, the Supreme Court basically came up with this particular construct where the appointments with respect to the higher judiciary would take place on the basis of the recommendations of the collegium, and it's in a way binding on the government, binding on the executive, comprised of the Chief Justice of India and the 4 senior most judges. So the government tried to bring the NJC, the National Judicial Appointments Commission, the 99th Constitutional Amendment Act. It was struck down by the judiciary, by the Supreme Court, saying that it basically infringed the aspects of independence of the judiciary. And therefore, what we see is that the Supreme Court has its own process with respect to the appointment and transfer of judges. And the process is quite opaque in nature. Next aspect is that of performance and administrative accountability. What is the performance criteria on the basis of which you are having these aspects or appraisals of the judges? It's not clear whether the judges are fulfilling the aspects of performance or not. So there are no basically obligations on performing better in the judiciary, right? No formal evaluation takes place with respect to the judges, and judges are not answerable to anything. So it basically, they have a kind of a structure which is completely shielded, and therefore it protects them. And that's the reason till now we have had no judge of the Supreme Court or the High Court who has been removed through this particular process, because the procedure is quite rigid in nature, right? Now, it's a very good opportunity to also discuss the comparative aspects between UK and India. Why? Because UK is a parliamentary democracy also, right? But what is the status over there? See, when we look at the Indian system, what you have to see is that we give more importance to the aspects of independence of judiciary. The process of removal of the judges is quite rigid in nature. On the other hand, when we talk about the aspects of UK, over there's a kind of a ministerial responsibility which is there. And the process is not as rigid, right? So these are the differences. So in India, we have the independence, but over there, we have the executive's responsibility, right? So the aspects, the legal basis, again, I told 124, subclause 4 of the Constitution and Judges Enquiry Act. Over here, we have Constitutional Reforms Act of 2005 and Judicial Conduct Investigations Office. This office is very important because this office is in charge with respect to conducting different investigations with respect to the allegations which are there for these judges, against these judges, right? Grounds for removal, we have proved misbehavior or incapacity. Over here, it is misconduct or inability, less formally defined. Then we have removal mechanism. We have the removal process. Impeachment is not the correct word. Removal process, which again, which requires a special majority. Here, the Lord Chancellor can remove the judges. So what you see in aspect of ministerial responsibility, they can remove the inferior. Inferior means we have the judges of the lower courts. And with respect to the removal of the higher judiciary, it's a legislative process. So comparatively, it's quite flexible in nature, the removal process. Frequency, we had a particular attempt in Justice V. Ramaswamy, but never came to an end. Over here, the regular use of in-house reprimands or commandments, counseling or removals of lower judges. Higher judges usually resign before removal, so they themselves resign. Internal oversight, there's in-house procedure, in-house mechanism, as I told you, that the Chief Justice of India at that particular moment appointed the 3-membered committee. On the other hand, we have the Judicial Conduct Investigation Office and the Judicial Complaints Office to basically handle these complaints, right? Then we have public accountability. It's limited because there is limited transparency, right? And there are delays, what we have been witnessing, right? And there are political overtones also. Even the process is rigid. What we see is that there are political overtones in the whole process, right? Quicker disposal of complaints, public reporting, and statistics published by JCIO. And on the basis of the workings of the JCIO, we have the actions which is taken by the Lord Chancellor with respect to the removal of the judges of the lower judiciary. And when we talk about the removal of the judges of the higher judiciary, we have the legislative process. So the process in UK is quite flexible in nature. not as rigid as we have in India's case. What should be the way forward? See, even if you are saying that we are going to have our own procedures, that our own in-house procedures, please codify it. There has to be a statutory clarity with respect to these procedures, and there has to be a strict timeline within which the investigation and the proceeds of the report must be given to the other bodies, right? So there has to be a particular timeline. Establish the Judicial Complaints Authority, or strengthen or reintroduce the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill. Very important. Promote the annual disclosure and audits. So you cannot always say that it's on a voluntary basis. No, there has to be a particular framework within which you'll have to disclose your assets and what is the source of these assets. It is again very important. And make sure that there are aspects of transparency. Ensure the clear guidelines. We have the 2002 Bangalore Principles, which the judiciary itself came up with. But what has been the follow-up is not clear, right? Which focus upon the independence, which focus upon the impartiality, integrity, propriety, equality, and competence. Do read these things. So these are the Bangalore Principles. Balance between impartiality and public accountability, especially in higher judiciary. So in the guise of, again the same thing, in the guise of independence, you cannot say that we will not be accountable to the people. As the executive is accountable to the legislature and to the people at large, the judiciary is also accountable. And it has to make sure that the kind of procedures it is following, they should be made more robust, more transparent. I hope that is clear, right? Let's have a mains practice question. Judicial accountability is essential for maintaining the legitimacy and integrity of the judiciary. Discuss the various aspects of judicial accountability in India. Also compare India's approach with that of the United Kingdom in addressing the judicial misconduct and ensuring accountability. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. Coming to the simplify section, we have the first topic which talks about the soil of a nation. Let's talk about the gist of the article. What the authors in this article are saying is that there was a time that India was almost completely dependent upon the imports when we talk about the food aspects. That is, in order to satisfy the hunger of the people, we had to basically go for a lot of food imports. And most of it was done through the aid given by different countries around the world. For example, the authors talk about the US PL 480 program, where India received substantial food aid. Then this realization came that we have to become self-reliant. And under the overall guidance of MS Swaminathan, we basically started with the Green Revolution, where we used the high yield variety seeds, a lot of inputs in the form of fertilizers, chemicals, and slowly we started to see the boom in the agriculture sector. And right now we are not just self-sufficient. In fact, we are one of the largest exporters of various agricultural commodities around the world. Also, the levels of poverty has significantly reduced in India, if you look at the data, according to the purchasing power parity. But what the authors are saying is that there is one critical aspect of malnutrition which still exists. For example, according to the National Family Health Survey, more than 35% of the children are still stunted. That is low height for age, which basically represents the chronic undernutrition. And more than 19% of the children are wasted. That is low weight for height. So this talks about the acute malnutrition. So the authors are trying to go into the reason that why do we have this. What they're saying is that you'll have to look at the genesis of the problem, at the root cause. And what they say is that most of all is primarily because of the deficiencies we have in the soil. And that is reflected in the kind of deficiencies we have in our agricultural commodities, and ultimately the same goes in the bodies, and therefore there are deficiencies in the bodies too. The government has come up with soil health card program, definitely. But what we saw in some areas, there was prohibitively or extensive use of fertilizers, not really required. And that deteriorated the condition of the soil, right? On the other hand, what we still see is that the soil is deficient with respect to some of the very important micronutrients, for example, zinc, which the authors talk about. And therefore, what they're saying is that we have to focus upon the soil health first in order to make sure that the soil is healthy so that we can have these agricultural commodities which have the sufficient micronutrients. And ultimately, we have a healthy population. That's the overall gist. And we'll also have addition with respect to the prelims, right? So what they say is India, which lived from a ship to mouth with heavy dependence on food imports, under the US PL480 program in the 1960s, would emerge as the world's largest rice exporter. So we are one of the world's largest rice exporter. In 24-25, India exported 20.2 million tons of rice in a global market of 61 million tons. So almost 1/3 was exported by India itself. The country also runs the world's largest food distribution program as the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which provides 5 kg of free rice or wheat per person per month to more than 80 crores people. That is how you source the information from the article, right? And that's the very purpose of simplified section, in order to make you understand what the article talks about, right? Yet the Food Corporation of India holds about 57 million tons of rice, the highest stock in 20 years. At one hand, we have this paradox. We have population, which is malnutrition, suffering from malnutrition. On the other hand, we have so much of stocks, buffer stocks in the Food Corporation of India. Now, this basically talks about the inefficient policies we have, or the kind of demand and supply mismatch we are having. So there are already stocks present in the Food Corporation of India. Why don't we supply it to the people, right? That's again a question mark. And the buffer norm is almost of 13.54 million tons, right? Next aspect is poverty too has reduced significantly. The extreme poverty head count, less than $3 per day, at 2021 purchasing power parity, dropped from 27.1% in 2011 to just 5.3% in 2022. Significant reduction in the poverty rates. Notwithstanding these achievements, malnutrition among the children remains a challenge. According to the National Family Health Survey 5, reports that 35.5% of the children under 5 years of age are basically stunted. Low height for age represents chronic undernutrition, right? 32% are basically underweight and 19.3% are wasted. Low weight for height. Acute malnutrition, right? Food security in India has evolved beyond merely ensuring caloric sufficiency. It must now encompass nutritional security as well. This element is very important. One critical and often overlooked factor is health of the soil. Soil micronutrient deficiencies not only impair the agriculture productivity but also degrade the nutritional quality of the crops. Crops grown on nutrient deficient soil often mirror these deficiencies, leading to silent but pervasive form of malnutrition in humans, because that is what we are consuming. If the soil is having deficiencies, obviously the crops would have, and the same would be seen in the humans also, right? Take zinc. Its deficiency in soil translates into low zinc content in cereals like wheat and rice, which in turn is linked to childhood stunting. So it's because of the soil that we are having these effects of stunting, right? A condition that affects this physical development, long-term cognitive health, that is the basic functioning of the mind, right? As well as the professional life of the person. Let's now turn the status of Indian soil. Of more than 8.8 million soil samples tested under the Soil Health Card Scheme in 24, less than 5% of have sufficient high or sufficient nitrogen. Look at this map. Very, very beautiful description. We just have almost 4.6% of the total samples collected, which have a sufficient nitrogen content. Only 40% having sufficient phosphorus content, only 32% having sufficient potassium content, and only 20.4% having sufficient organic carbon. So these are basically the blue and the light blue, the blue and the sky blue colors showcase the kind of deficiencies we have, right? Only 40% have sufficient phosphate, 32% have sufficient potash, and just 20% are sufficient in soil organic carbon. SOC is a critical parameter defining the physical, chemical, and biological properties of soil. These govern its holding capacity of water and inputs, for example, fertilizers, and nutrient use efficiency. How well the soil is able to use the nutrients which are given to it. That is what the nutrient use efficiency is all about, NUE, right? As per the Indian Institute of Soil Sciences, SOC is in the range of 0.5 to 0.75% is adequate. But according to the World Food Laureate, Ratan Lal, who has worked on soil health throughout his career, he prescribes that the carbon content in the soil should be at least 1.5 to 2%. So he gives a higher number, right? Our soils suffer from deficiency of sulphur as well as micronutrients like iron, zinc, boron. These deficiencies range from moderate to severe. We have also observed that in some parts of the country, nitrogen is overused. Requires X, you are giving X plus something, right? That is overuse. While phosphorus and potassium are underused. For example, in Punjab, the nitrogen use exceeds recommendations by 61%, while the potassium use is short by 89% and phosphorus use is short by 8%. So phosphorus and potassium you are not applying. Instead, you are applying over of the nitrogen. Obviously, it would have effects on the soil. Telangana also mirrors the same imbalance. The situation is similar in several other states. The highly imbalanced use of NPK and the neglect of micronutrients leads to the suboptimal agricultural productivity. Nationwide, the fertilizer to grain response ratio declined significantly from 1:10 in 1970s to 1:2 merely 2.7. The response mechanism is also reducing for the soil. Soil is now not responding, primarily because there has been overuse of these fertilizers, right? Moreover, the application of granular urea results in substantial nitrogen losses, with only 35 to 40% of the nitrogen being absorbed by the crops. What the authors are saying, that we are using granules of these nitrogen, what is this urea, and only 35 to 40% of being is used, and the rest is either it is being emitted in the form of nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas, or being percolated in the ground, which is contaminating the water, right? So the use efficiency of fertilizer is quite low. The remaining nitrogen is either released into the atmosphere as nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas that is 273 times more potent than carbon dioxide, or leaches into the groundwater, contaminating it with nitrates and making it unsafe for consumption. So therefore, the imbalanced use of NPK is also increasing the pollution rather than increasing the grain yields. Additionally, a significant proportion of urea is diverted to non-agriculture uses and also find its way to neighboring countries. There has been siphoning of these urea bags to different countries around India, right? To restore the soil health and improve the crop and human nutrition, India needs a paradigm shift. We have to change the whole picture comprehensively from indiscriminate use of fertilizers to a tailored and science-based soil nutrition management. Use these key terms in your answers. This calls for more precise and customized fertilization strategies which are informed by rigorous soil testing and aligned with the nutritional needs of different soils and crops. So there has to be proper management of the soil. See what is really required and then use appropriate amount of fertilizers, not excess. Now, this is again important, the validation content. Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, right, was launched with the specific purpose of ameliorating the hardships faced by the poor and needy due to economic disruptions caused by COVID-19. The central government has decided to extend the particular Yojana for additional 5 years. Then we have PM Poshan, that stands for enhancing the nutritional outcomes, aims to tackle the hunger and improve the education by enhancing the nutritional status of children in government and government aided school and by encouraging regular school attendance among the disadvantaged students. Do give a look to it. Then we have the rice fortification. Again, we add the fortification, we do the fortification of the rice so as to make sure there is basically increase in the nutritional aspect. Fortified rice is the rice that has been enhanced with essential vitamins and minerals to improve its nutritional value. Just you can have a look at these infographics. Then this is very important. Global Hunger Index. Can you just tell me who publishes the Global Hunger Index? Very important. So we have the Global Hunger Index is a tool for comprehensively measuring and tracking the hunger at global, regional and national levels. GHI scores are based on the values of 4 components. The 4 components are undernutrition, the share of the population with insufficient calorie intake, child stunting, the share of the children under the age of 5 who have low height for their age, reflecting chronic undernutrition. Child wasting, the share of children under the 5 years who have low weight for height, reflecting acute undernutrition. Child mortality, the share of children who die before their 5th birthday, partly reflecting the fatal mix of inadequate nutrition and unhealthy environment. Based on these 4 indicators, the Global Hunger Index score is calculated on a 100-point scale, reflecting the severity of hunger, where 0 is the best possible score. Please note this because sometimes the UPSC has asked such questions that what does 0 or 100 imply? No hunger, and 100 is the worst. Each country's DHI score is classified by severity from low to extremely alarming. Now let's look at India's position. So India's score was 27.3. In 2024 Global Hunger Index, India ranks 105th out of 127 countries with sufficient data to calculate the 2024 Global Hunger Index scores. With a score of 27.3 in 24 Global Hunger Index, India has level of hunger that is serious. And that is the reason the government has many times contested the report itself, right? But we as UPSC aspirant, we should not go into the political aspects. We are only concerned about what this report is all about, who publishes it, what are the components of the report. So you can just have a look at the different parameters. Now this is again a very important graph. It shows the Global Hunger Index scores in Southeast and Southeast Asia. Look at this. We have India over here. India has a score of 27.3. We have countries which are performing worse than us. We have Pakistan, Afghanistan, and we have the DPR, Korea, right? But look at the good side. Look at China, how beautifully it is performing. Look at Nepal, Cambodia, Myanmar. All these countries have a better score than India. So again, a cause of concern, and therefore we should improve. Look at this. Soil health card was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister on 19th February 2015. Soil sample collection and testing upscale from grid to individual farm holding with farmer participation. The scheme recommends appropriate dosages of fertilizers for crop production and improving soil health. Awareness creation is also an important component. These are the benefits: capacity building of district and state level staff, strengthening the functioning of the soil testing laboratories, and to promote the soil test based on nutrient management, to diagnose the soil fertility related constraints, to issue soil health cards to all the farmers. So these points are important. Probably a question in the prelims can come. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to sulfur dioxide emissions from India's thermal power plants. Let's talk about the gist of the article. We have the Environment Ministry coming up with various regulations for years for these thermal power plants in order to make them reduce their sulfur dioxide emissions. But the reality is that most of these thermal power plants, they haven't been able to do so. Therefore, in the recent notice, the Environment Ministry has basically exempted a lot of these thermal power plants to abide by these regulations. But how do these thermal power plants reduce their sulfur dioxide emissions? They use the FGD units, flue gas desulfurization units. The installation of the FGD units is not an easy process. It's quite cost-intensive process. And that's the reason many of these thermal power plants, they have failed to basically adopt this particular process. So we'll see why the Environment Ministry has come up with such notifications. What is the reason they are giving, right? The Environment Ministry exempted a majority of India's coal-based thermal power plants from installing systems that are designed to remove the sulfur dioxide emissions, a key contributor to the air pollution known as the flue gas desulfurization, FGD. Remember this. Devices, these systems cut the SO2 from the flue gas, which is basically the resultant gas of the industrial process, right? Which is the residue from the thermal power plants. Of the remaining plants, those around Delhi NCR have to comply with December 2027 deadline, and the rest will be asked to fit these devices on a case-to-case basis. So a more relaxed approach. Originally, these plants had to install the FGD devices by 2017. Look at the condition. They had to have these devices by 2017. Right now, we are in 2025. Almost a decade, right? Over the years, they have received several extensions to comply. Why are SO2 emissions from thermal power plants an issue? What is the real reason? Once released into the atmosphere, this is the mechanism, understand. SO2 reacts with ammonia to form ammonium sulfate, which is responsible for roughly 1/3 of India's fine particulate matter PM 2.5. You must have heard about particulate matter 2.5. Almost 1/3 is because of this particular substance, which is ammonium sulfate. And this is produced because of the sulfur dioxide, right? According to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, PM 2.5 is injurious to human health as it can lead to chronic diseases such as asthma, heart attack, bronchitis, and other respiratory problems. Direct exposure to high levels of SO2 can irritate the eyes, throat, lungs. Long-term exposure can result in increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, and premature deaths. That's the reason the average life expectancy of a resident in Delhi is almost 9 years lesser than the other people, primarily because of the increase of the prevalence of non-communicable diseases. And this is one of the most important reasons is the pollution. SO2 also affects the environment as it contributes to the formation of acid rain, right? So we have the combination of SO2 and the water, then it leads to the formation of acid, which can damage the ecosystems. One of the biggest sources of SO2 emissions in India is the power sector, especially the coal-based thermal power plants. The SO2 levels were higher in 2023 compared to 2019, with a notable increase in regions dominated by coal-based thermal plants. So these are the main sources, right? What has the government done to address the issue? In 2015, the Environment Ministry notified the first ever emission norms for control of SO2 and other harmful substances from coal-based thermal plants. They were required to install the FGD devices by December 2017. This did not happen as the deadline was extended 4 times. They argued that installation of FGD devices was costly and could cause several issues such as disruption of power supply due to shutdown for installation and increase in the electricity bills, right? So these were the reasons provided by these thermal power plant operators, right? To address these concerns, the center amended the emission norms in 2021. It put 596 coal-based thermal plants unit in 3 categories. These are the 3 categories. Categories A, plants located within the 10-kilometer radius of NCR, cities having a million plus population. Deadline was 2022. Category B, plants located within a 10-kilometer radius of critically polluted areas or non-attainment cities. There can be a question in the prelims asking what are non-attainment cities? Cities that have exceeded the national ambient air quality standards for 5 consecutive years. That is a definition of non-attainment cities. Remember this. The deadline was 2023. Category C, the remaining plants whose deadline was 2024. Note that 78% of the plants were put in Category C, almost 11 in Category A, and the rest in Category B. The latest change in the norms has exempted the Category C from installing the FGD devices. Almost 78% have been exempted. No need to install. Category A plants in operation and under construction have to comply by the end of 27. The center will decide compliance category of B on a case-by-case basis. Much more relaxed approach. The Environment Ministry has said that the plants supposed to retire before December 30 will not be required to basically put these devices. What is behind the latest changes norms? According to the center, the change in the norms is based on 3 studies which suggests that FGD devices are not necessary for coal-based thermal power plants. So these studies say that FGDs are not necessary. And these are the studies which were conducted on the directives of the center by different institutes. Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, the National Institute of Advanced Sciences, and the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, NEERI. The studies have argued against the installation of FGD devices, saying that SO2 levels around the plants are well within the norms prescribed under the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We'll read about that. They have also suggested that government needs to focus on curbing not just SO2 emissions, but rather the overall particulate matter pollution. The IIT Delhi and NIS studies have also revealed that while reducing the SO2 emissions, the operation of FGD devices has increased carbon dioxide and PM pollution. So they're saying instead, what the FGD is doing is it is increasing the CO2. Strange. All 3 studies were commissioned by the government. What have experts criticized this particular change in the norm? Experts say that the claim made by the studies that the SO2 levels around the plants is misleading. For instance, the Center for Research on Energy and Environment has said that the air quality monitoring stations don't capture the real impact of power plant because they don't track whether the emissions drift upwind or downwind. And they certainly don't account for chemical reactions that convert SO2 into the pollutants like PM 2.5. A 2021 analysis by Center for Science and Environment had also presented notable findings. It said that the plumes from power stations travel long distances of 300 km, and during this time they get converted to secondary pollutants. That's the reason you are not able to trace SO2, because it has already converted into secondary pollutants. So therefore, in a way, FGDs are important. Look at this. National Air Quality Index. Air Quality Index is a tool for effective communication of air quality status to the people, which is easy to understand. Therefore, we use color codings in layman terms so that people can understand. It transforms the complex air quality data of various pollutants into a single number, nomenclature, and color. So there are 6 AQI categories, namely the good, satisfactory, moderately polluted, poor, very poor, and severe. 6 categories. Each of these categories is decided based upon the ambient concentration values of air pollutants and their likely health impacts, known as the health breakpoints. AQ subindex and health breakpoints are evolved for 8 pollutants: PM 10, particulate matter 10, PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, ammonia, and lead. Lead is also there, do remember, for which short-term national ambient air quality standards are prescribed. Do give a reading, possibly a question can come in the exam, and this is all prescribed by CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a very serious issue of cyber crimes. Now, we all know that there are certain hubs of cybercrime which are there around the world. One of them is in the Southeast Asian countries. We had a lot of Indians traveling on visitor visa to these countries, and they have not returned. Primarily because they have been trapped there, and they are basically being worked as a part of the overall nexus of the cybercrime. And over here, we see the importance of a particular body of the government, which is I4C, Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. Of the 2,471 rescued Indians who were lured to various Southeast Asian countries with fake job offers made to engage in cybercrime and other fraudulent activities. So initially, we have these young people who are lured that you will get so much of money in these countries. So they travel with a visitor visa. And then they are trapped there and they are made to work in these domains, fraudulent activities, cyber crimes. We have 273 from Tamil Nadu, 247 from UP. Need not to remember the numbers. But again, the data has been compiled by the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center from 22 to May 25. As many as 22,000 Indians traveled on visitor visa to Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam. These are the countries: Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam from January 1, 2022 to January 31st, 2025 have not returned yet. They're still trapped over there. According to the data by I4C, a unit of Ministry of Home Affairs, that is how you look at the data in the newspaper. The newspaper itself tells you that under which ministry this particular body is. So it is Ministry of Home Affairs. Over 20,000 Indians are expected to be working in scam compounds situated in Southeast Asia, from where they are targeting Indians and citizens of other countries. Scam compounds, another important word. Data of passengers who did not return shows that 22,000 Indians who went to visit a visa to Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam from January 2022 to January 31st, 2025 have not returned till March 1st. The Indian Express first reported that more than 5,000 Indians were suspected to be trapped in Cambodia after being allegedly held and forced to carry out cyber fraud. This is a very tough situation. Let's talk about the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. Again, I have taken the snippets from the website itself. That is why the original websites are a much reliable source. Ministry of Home Affairs, right? The I4C is an initiative of Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, to deal with the cybercrime in a country coordinated and comprehensive manner. I4C focuses on tackling all issues related to cybercrime for the citizens, which includes improving coordination between various law enforcement agencies. We have different agencies of the states also, of the center also. So proper coordination. And stakeholders driving change in India's overall capacity and capability to tackle the cybercrime and to improve the citizen satisfaction levels. Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center was approved on 5th October 2018. Since its rollout, it has worked towards enhancing the nation's collective capability to tackle the cybercrimes and develop effective coordination among the law enforcement agencies. So the primary task is the coordination among LEAs, law enforcement agencies. We have objectives to act as a nodal point to curb cybercrime, to strengthen the fight against cybercrime, facilitate the easy filing of cybercrimes, to act as early warning system for the law enforcement agencies, awareness creation, and assist states and UTs in their capacity building. I hope that's clear. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a very important component of the governance, which is grievance redressal mechanism. So the gist of the article is that in Jammu Kashmir, we are having a particular grievance redressal mechanism known as Raabita, which you can quote also in your answers. That is how these value additions come in the GS paper 4 and GS paper 2, right? After years of bureaucratic rule in a system without elected representatives, a common refrain among the locals across districts was the lack of sunwai. That is, the government is responsible for hearing the people, but we didn't have a system in place over there. Soon after taking over the reins of the government in Jammu Kashmir, CM Umar Abdullah announced setting up of a dedicated grievance redressal unit at Gupkar. The long queues, the winding corridors, I could not keep up with the physical stress of knocking on the doors at the secretariat. That is how you use the examples in GS2 or GS paper 4, right? Shahzada Begum said, for 3 years, she said she had been trying to secure final documentation for her retirement. Due to some discrepancies with my date of birth, I was not able to secure my final papers. Then my son-in-law heard about the Raabita and I came here. In 2 visits, the officers have helped resolve my particular case. That's the very objective of grievance redressal mechanism. Since its inauguration in December 24, the cell has received over 19,000 complaints, and in the 7 months, the cell has been functioning. Nearly 70% of the complaints received have been focused upon the developmental needs, the basic needs: electricity, water, bridges, roads, and irrigation. So that is how the importance of grievance redressal mechanism is, and therefore this particular program also becomes important. We have the Centralized Public Grievance Redress and Monitoring System, CPG-RAMS, part of the Ministry of Personal Public Grievance and Pensions. CPG-RAMS is an online platform available to the citizens 24/7 to lodge their grievances to the public authorities on a subject related to service delivery. It is a single portal connected to all the ministries and departments of the Government of India and the states. Every ministry and states have role-based access to the systems. CPG-RAMS is also accessible to the citizens through standalone mobile application, downloadable through Google Play Store, and mobile application integrated with Umang. We'll also read about Umang, right? Such type of questions have directly come in the prelims, and that's the reason I have given this. The status of the grievance filed in the CPG-RAMS can be tracked with its unique registration ID, which is provided at the time of registration of the complainant. So that is how it basically works. CPG-RAMS also provides the appeal facility to the citizens if they're not satisfied with the resolution of the grievance officer. We have the next app, which is Umang app. Very, very important. Look at the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. One app, one platform, many government services. Umang Unified Mobile Application for New Age Governance is developed by Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology and National E-Governance Division (NEGD) to drive the mobile governance in India. Umang provides a single platform, important, for all Indian citizens to access pan-India e-government services ranging from central to local governments. Not just restricted to central government, but also even states and local governments. Very important. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to a very important body, which is Indian Council of Medical Research. So ICMR is basically calling partners to commercialize its malaria vaccine. The Indian Council of Medical Research has invited the country's vaccine manufacturers to partner with it to launch and sell the malaria vaccine, which its regional center in Bhubaneswar has developed, called as Ad-Falsi-Vax. It is a recombinant vaccine. What is a recombinant vaccine? Parts of the genes that encode for the targets are inserted into a cell. The target proteins are expressed and then used to trigger an immune response. So that is how the newspaper also gives you how this particular vaccine works, right? Malaria is a parasitic infection, again added information, transmitted by mosquitoes. While the current vaccine protects against the most common one that causes infections in humans, called Plasmodium falciparum, there are at least 4 other parasites from the same family known to cause the infections. Now we have this particular functioning of the recombinant vaccine. Viruses, bacteria or cells can be created in the lab which carry the DNA coding for surface proteins from virus or bacteria. These harmless hybrids can be injected into the body, cause an immune response to the viral surface proteins without making you sick. So we have the target virus, right? So we are basically taking this portion and inserting into this, right, recombinant DNA virus. Now vaccine released into the body, and then vaccine taken up by antigen presenting cell and displayed on surface as antigen, right? Next, what happens is immune helper cells identify the antigen and triggers an immune response. So this is nothing but you're using a portion of this particular virus into this particular vaccine, and that is how the immune response is triggered. Now let's talk about the ICMR, again very important. In 1911, the government of India set up the Indian Research Fund Association with the specific objectives of sponsoring and coordinating the medical research in the country. So it's pre-independence. After independence, it was re-designated as Indian Council for Medical Research, apex body for formulation, coordination and promotion of biomedical research in the country. We already saw that what great role it played when we talk about the COVID-19 crisis in India. Conduct, coordinate and implement the medical research for the benefit of the society, translating the medical innovations into products. And that is what we are seeing, that it has developed a product, now it is trying to commercialize it, right? For public health system. Organizational structure, the governing body, this is important, of the ICMR is presided by the Union Health Minister. Always remember, the governing body is presided by the Union Health Minister. It is assisted in scientific and technical matters by scientific advisory body comprising of eminent experts in different disciplines. Research is carried out currently through the Council's 32 permanent research institute centers around the country. So it's not just a single institute, it has regional institutes around the country. Mission-oriented national institutes located in different parts of India. This is Indian Council for Medical Research. That's all from my side. I really hope you enjoyed the session. All the very best. Thank you so much.